everyone, hope you're all doing well. Today, you can probably tell I'm pretty tired. The last few days, my anxiety, even though I haven't felt super anxious, has been stopping me from sleeping well. So I'm working on it. Hopefully tonight I'll get a little bit better. Sleep hygiene obviously is extremely important for mental health. Without it, your whole body begins to not function properly. The levels of cortisol in your brain get higher, and so you are more likely, when you're not sleeping well, to have anxiety attacks or bouts of depression and those kinds of things. So here's hoping, fingers crossed, that the next few days I get some better rest. For right now, I have this little guy. It's called Trauma Life. I don't know if you can read that. It's an oil from Young Living. It's one that I've only just found. It just recently got released by them. And it's keeping my anxiety under wraps. I felt like earlier today, I had some stress, like just some kind of everyday stressors, financial. And I came home from my mom's, and on the whole drive home, I just felt like I was, about to start fighting off this anxiety attack. Came home, put a little bit of this right here on my forehead. They call it your crown chakra, for those of you who might be yogis. And within minutes, I could feel my anxiety taper down. So I am very thankful to have little tools like these that help really quickly. Obviously, using other coping strategies is really important as well. So I've done a few little breathing techniques today. Anyways, though, what I'm here to talk to you guys about today is depression. And anxiety, but kind of the more ins and outs, how it works, a few little statistics that I've got for you that you may find interesting. It's really important to know this, whether you have a mental health disorder or not. It has become so prevalent that people are having mental health issues that I think everybody needs to be educated on it, whether or not it's to help reduce stigma, or just so that if people do end up developing depression or anxiety or other mental health symptoms, that they kind of have a better idea of what's actually going on in their head. I've mentioned in some of my other videos that by educating yourself about what's going on in here, it helps you to recognize that you're not crazy. It helps you to not stigmatize yourself, which is very, very important. We're creating those new pathways. I hope you watched that video where I talked about the pathways in your brain. The whole point is, like, your brain is like a roadway. It's like a city with a whole bunch of different roadways. If you don't continue to drive a certain roadway, then there's no point in maintaining it, right? So it's going to break down over time. The roadways that you drive more frequently are going to be more maintained. So that's what you have to think about with your thoughts. So instead of thinking negatively about yourself all the time, if you start thinking more positively, eventually those negative thoughts about yourself go away. So understanding the stigma behind this is going to make a really, really big All right, sorry about the little pause break there. My phone decided it was running out of memory, so I got that all fixed up. So anyways, we were just talking about the roadways in your brain and talking about stigma and talking about how important it is to really understand the ins and outs and chemical reactions and those kinds of things that have to do with depression. So first of all, though, I want to start off with some facts. These are recent facts by the Canada Mental Health Association so it's specifically to Canada. I know the rates are shockingly almost higher in the United States than they are here. I mean, obviously there's a lot of things that is going to make an impact. Environmental factors do absolutely play into whether or not people will develop anxiety or depression or other mental health disorders. So I just want to start off by saying a few of these. I'll try not to go on too long about it, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about those chemicals in your brain. So mental illness indirectly will affect every Canadian at some point in their life. Whether that is you are having the mental health struggles, or a family member, or a colleague, or a friend, or whoever it may be. But somehow or another, every Canadian is connected to somebody with a mental health disorder. That is why I keep saying in all of my videos, please share my videos. It is really important for people to talk about this. We need to start this conversation, because even if you don't have a mental health disorder and you share these videos, it's very likely that somebody you know who may even be closeted with a mental health disorder will see it, and maybe it will encourage them to get some help, or maybe it will help them to feel better about themselves and take the right steps to becoming healthier. So in any given year, 1 in 5 people in Canada will experience a mental health problem. So for instance, I was at a friend's house earlier in the week. We hadn't seen each other since before COVID started. Of course, we were social distancing, but there was a group of 8 of us, and out of the entire group, 50% of us have or have had issues with mental health. 50% in a small group. So imagine how big that population really is, especially if I'm saying now that it's 1 in 5 people at some point in their lifetime will have a problem with mental health illness. Approximately 8% of adults are going to experience major depression at some point in their lives. 8%, maybe it doesn't sound like a whole lot, but we're just talking the adult population, and major depression in 8% of that population is actually pretty significant. So when we're talking about how common depression and anxiety and other mental health disorders are, by the age of 40, about 50% of the population will have or have had a mental illness. 50% by the age of 40. Just let that sink in. That's a lot. Especially now with things like COVID going on and how quickly our world has changed, I would not hesitate to say that that number is going to shockingly increase. You have to think about, we've all been quarantined in our homes. The rates of domestic abuse, of child abuse, all of that has risen. And then obviously you have people who are getting anxiety over, being worried about contracting the virus and all those sorts of things. So mental health is going to be severely impacted by this as well. So anxiety disorders will affect about 5% of a household population. So that's anywhere from mild or severe. Suicide accounts for 24% of all deaths among 15 to 24-year-olds, and 16% among 25 to 44-year-olds. That's with the younger population, that's almost a quarter of the population. That's crazy, guys. That's a lot. Now imagine if mental health was destigmatized and we could get more funding and programs, more therapy availabilities. I work with youth in a mental health realm, and you wouldn't believe how hard it can be to find those kids treatment, especially when it comes to addiction. I mean, I've spoken with 17-year-olds with meth addictions, who have lived on riverbanks with men dug out into the side of the hill. I mean, like, these are very severe cases, and this person in particular, she was unable to find a treatment center. She had to get clean, get sober on a stranger's couch who just let her couch surf there. Detox is no joke, guys. Like, this is very severe, and this is why we need to open up the conversation. So suicide is one of the leading causes of death in both men and women from adolescence to middle age. If we had more treatment options, if it was more accessible, these statistics would not be as high. If there was no stigma, people would search for help. People would not be afraid to tell their stories, to come out. So the mortality rate due to suicide among men is 4 times higher than that in women. And part of that, again, has to do with stigma. You are going to hear me say that word probably 3,000 more times, if not more, because it is really severe. One of the leading causes of mental health disorders is stigma. So, because, like I said, people are afraid to come forward about it because they are afraid of the judgment that they will face. How sad is that? People would rather suffer internally to the point that they no longer want to live their lives than find help, because they're worried about how other people will treat them, how other people will look at them. How is that fair? Okay, I know this is getting really heavy. So I just want to say one more statistic and then we'll move on. Almost 1/2, or 49%, of those who feel they have suffered from depression or anxiety have never gone to see a doctor about the problem. That is a huge statistic too. And so that's one of the reasons I'm here, is to encourage people, please, if you have ever had a suicidal thought, an ideation, if you have ever had a hard time getting out of bed and it's debilitating, if you are getting panic attacks, anxiety attacks, you can be helped, but you need to go forward. You need to reach out, because nobody can do that for you. One thing about mental health, and I did this myself, is I hid it. I hid it from my husband, who is my best friend, who I've never hidden anything from in our entire relationship. I didn't tell him that I was suffering, that I was hurting. He didn't know until I literally couldn't hold it in anymore. And it started affecting not only my life, but our relationship. Please come forward. Please reach out to somebody. I've started sharing my story and I don't regret it for a second. Okay. So that's where I'm going to stop on the heavy topic. Now let's talk about how this happens. Okay. So in order for me to explain what exactly depression is chemical-wise within your brain, we need to talk about neurotransmitters. So first you need to know what a neurotransmitter is. So a neurotransmitter is a chemical within your brain that carries messages from one nerve cell to another. So these messages are things like telling you how you should feel, how you should think, and how you should behave in any given situation. So a neurotransmitter essentially is what tells your body to do everything it needs to do. They tell your heart when it needs to beat, those sort of things. Your lungs when you need to breathe. So they're very, very important for our everyday functions. They also play a key role then in depression. So in depression and anxiety, there are 3 different neurotransmitters that we need to worry about. So one is called dopamine. It's one of my favorite ones to talk about because I have an addiction-based background. So throughout university, I really put a lot of my focuses on learning about addictions, and dopamine is a part of what they call the reward pathway of the brain. So dopamine is a natural kind of cannabinoid within our own brain. It is essentially what we call, it is very much a happy neurotransmitter. So what it does is it works on our reward system. So if you're doing something that you thoroughly enjoy and you think to yourself, man, I am so happy right now. This is making me feel so great. I want to do it again. That's very likely dopamine working within your brain. What dopamine does is it tells your body, hey, we really like this. Let's do it again. And so it creates a cycle. With what drugs do a lot of the time is they mimic dopamine, or they increase dopamine. And so they tell somebody's body that, hey, we really like this. We want more. So when you're wondering why somebody has an addiction and they're unable to stop, it's because that reward pathway is being manipulated by those drugs. The second one that we have is called norepinephrine. So norepinephrine is both a neurotransmitter and a hormone. It plays a key role in what's called your freeze, flight, or fight response. So if you were to be chased by a bear right now, there are 3 different types of reactions that you would typically have. Your cortisol spikes. Your cortisol is your stress hormone, if you remember from my past videos. And then norepinephrine will typically spike or drop. It does one or the other within anxiety and depression in reaction to a stressor, any kind of stressor that might be in your environment. So if you're being chased by a bear, you have those 3 responses that you may have. You may freeze. So you may stop in your tracks and stare at the bear and be like, I don't know what to do. You may flight, which is you're going to run away, or you may fight. So with anxiety and depression, you get the highs and you get the lows. But the thing is that you don't have the proper amount of serotonin, which is the next thing we're going to talk about, to regulate that. So what that means is even everyday life stressors. So financial issues, a fight with your best friend, your car is almost out of gas, and you're late for work, whatever it may be, all of those things, if you get an extra amount of norepinephrine or a lesser amount, they cause mania of some type, whether it be manic or non-manic. So basically with a depression and anxiety, you don't have to be being chased by a bear to have the same type of reactions you would have being chased by a bear. It can be just normal everyday stressors that cause that imbalance. Hopefully that made sense. Okay, so the last one, which is my favorite one to talk about, you'll hear me say it 100,000 times, I'm sure, throughout our time together, is serotonin. So serotonin is your happy chemical in your body. So it helps you to regulate your mood, which is so wonderful if you have enough of it. So in anxiety and depression, what typically happens is there is not enough serotonin, or not enough serotonin being sent throughout your body. How that happens can be different ways, and we'll talk about that here shortly. So what I've got for you is a diagram that's going to help me to explain how these work in your brain now that you kind of know a little bit about what they are. So what I have here, I drew you a little picture. I tried this earlier on my laptop and this did not work. My video did not turn out well, so this is try 2. Drew you a picture this time. Took some my sweet time for you. So this is what we call a synaptic gap. This is a normal, healthy brain. So I'm going to show you what we've got here. So all of the little C's are your cortisol. So remember, that's your stress hormone. All of these little blue S's are your serotonin, and the little N's are your norepinephrine. So this is kind of what a balanced synaptic gap and neurons would look like. So from here, all of the neurotransmitters are released into the synaptic gap. Down here, these little orange guys are all receptors. So what will happen is if you're experiencing something, let's just say where it's going to make you happy, so you wake up and it's your birthday or it's Christmas and you're just super, super happy. So what happens is your body will release that, or your brain will release that serotonin, and your serotonin will flood this gap and sit into these little receptors. These receptors send the message to your brain that you're happy. And it'll do the same, obviously, with cortisol and norepinephrine. What else you need to know is that there's a reuptake channel. So as this kind of starts to fill up, these neurotransmitters will start to get pulled back up into this little channel. And that's really important for when we talk about antidepressants later. So anyways, this is a healthy brain. It's got a really good balance, not a whole lot of cortisol, lots of serotonin being released in there to help counterbalance that cortisol, a healthy amount of norepinephrine. Like I said, you don't want none, but you do need, a little bit in there for sure to keep your moods stabilized and to keep you on your toes, because you always need to be ready to engage in a threat if a bear suddenly jumps out of the woods. Okay? So now I'm going to show you kind of what a depressed brain looks like. So I've kind of got it folded funky. I'm going to try to just fold it quickly a little bit better for you so you can kind of separate these pictures easier. Okay, so this is a depressive brain, and I circled, you can see that reuptake channel that I circled for you. So the differences in a brain with a depressive disease state is you'll see here there's a lot more cortisol, lots more C's in there being released into that synaptic gap. Not nearly as much serotonin. In this case, I put lots of norepinephrine. So I'm going through a really stressful situation, I guess, and maybe I'm about to have an anxiety attack because I have too much adrenaline and norepinephrine in my system. So the other thing you may notice is that there are less receptors. So a common cause of depression can be either that there is not enough serotonin being produced and let into the synaptic gap. The second thing could be that you don't have enough receptors within your brain to carry the signals of being happy. The third may be that your serotonin is being taken up quicker than your brain is releasing it. Maybe because your brain is not is not creating enough of it. So there are lots of different reasons why your chemicals in your brain may be out of balance. You may also not have the proper number of nerve receptors in general, and there is no normal. I'm going to say there is no normal. Brain chemistry is not an exact science anyways. Everybody's brain is different. Okay? I hope you're still following along. We're almost done. So the last thing I want to say, I want to talk about this reuptake channel. So we talked about how serotonin deficiency can create depression, how too much norepinephrine can create depression or too little, or how it can impact your anxieties. Norepinephrine is a lot harder, I find, to understand than the serotonin itself, so that's why I'm focusing more on serotonin. But the reuptake receptor, like I said, this comes very handy in understanding why antidepressants work. So there's two different types of antidepressants. There's one called an SSRI, so it's selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So as I mentioned, if your body is either not producing enough serotonin to release into this gap, or your body is reuptaking it too quickly, what an antidepressant does is it sends these little things that like a chemical that mimics serotonin, and it blocks this reuptake receptor. Sorry, it doesn't mimic a serotonin, but it blocks the reuptake receptor. So what that does is it blocks serotonin from being reabsorbed. What does that mean? That means your brain, if you're not producing enough, has longer to release more serotonin to give it more time to get to these receptors because it builds up in here. Thus, the more time the serotonin has to get to the receptors, the more serotonin will eventually get to the receptors and you will be happier. The other type of antidepressant is an SNRI. That's a serotonin and norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor. So sometimes it may be, like I said, you may not be producing enough norepinephrine either. So you may not be able to respond to threats. Threats, like I said, could be daily stressors. So that will help the norepinephrine to also stay within the gap long enough to get to those receptors and be sent throughout your body to tell you, hey, you're happy, hey, you're ready to respond to a threat. Anyways, I really hope that makes sense. Talking about neurotransmitters and how depression works in the brain is very complicated. I've tried to simplify it the absolute best that I can to help you figure out what might be going on in here, why you're not crazy for feeling the way you feel. There's actually something happening up here. There may be structures of your brain that are built a little bit different than somebody who has a normal brain. I say normal because, like I said, brain chemistry is not an exact science. We all have very different experiences, and our experiences help to shape our brain and the chemicals within it. Anyways, guys, I'm going to stop there for tonight. Please send me a message if you need any clarification. I will do my best to help you out. I hope you all have a beautiful day. I'm going to go try to get some sleep. As I mentioned before, I haven't been sleeping well, so we will see how that goes. I'm hoping for the best. I hope you guys have a great sleep whenever you get to bed too. Have a beautiful day, and I hope you find some happiness. Love you all, and thank you very much for watching.